Hi everybody, I meet you today for the second video of our series about the history of North America, of Canada, and of the relations between the European settlers and the indigenous. At the end of part 1, I started the chapter about the great explorers with Christopher Columbus and the Spanish, who at that time didn't go higher northward than the current Kansas. Today we are going to address a decisive moment, the arrival of Jacques Cartier in the current Quebec. Make yourself at home. Without further delay, we continue the sequel of our story. The history of North America is taking a new turn with our next explorer, named Jacques Cartier.
Capitaine Jacques Cartier. Sujet de François Ier, roi de France.
I think I never heard this name before arriving in Quebec. Yet here it is a bit all around. To name a street or a boulevard, a bridge, a mall, or a public square, even a mountain in Gaspésie bears his name. Therefore, I was thinking that he should be amazing, but I was far from the truth. For this video, I also based my work on the book Ils étaient l'Amérique, so in English They Were America, from Serge Bouchard and Marie-Christine Lévesque at Lux Editions. I am going to read some passages, so I will give you some translation I wrote on my computer. In 1524, the Kingdom of France is waking up, then under the reign of François I. France is late for the party, whereas some others enrich themselves for a while now. It is quite foolish for the crown to stay that blurred while it is known that some sailors of the country are going to fish in the Saint Laurent estuary. The king first asked Giovanni da Verrazzano, an Italian, to go find again and again the famous road towards Asia, which must be in the north, more northward than the Spanish colonies. The latter will reach North Carolina and sail along the coast up to Cape Breton and Newfoundland. Verrazzano will establish once and for all that North America is indeed a new continent. Above all, the sailor named Nova Gallia, so New France, the territory adjacent to the Saint Lawrence Gulf. However, Verrazzano will never set foot there. He died a little after. The king called next Jacques Cartier, who lives for his first expedition in 1534. Before this date, we don't know anything about the sailor native from Saint-Malo, or at any rate something that would explain the choice of the crown. Before continuing, I would like to set the scene and introduce you the characters for the sequel of this story. In 1534, the valley of the great river Canada, also say Hochelaga, is beautiful. Some old lush forests are along the waterway with their healthy and centenary trees. Having soft or hard wood, patient guardians of this place's sacrality. Waterfalls and tumultuous jumps, as well as many smaller freshwater rivers, pure as the dawn of time, discharge into it and swell its floods. This generous river, where the fish were in their empire, irrigate a nature without any wastes, wounds nor scars. It is a paradise for wild animals, big and small, wood caribou, moose, elks, turtles, bears and beavers. So we have the great river Hochelaga. The village of Hochelaga, at the bottom of Mont-Royal, which is actually the place of the current town of Montreal, In addition, there are 7 villages, including the village of Stadacone, of which we will discuss later. And these 7 villages happen to be at the future location of the current Quebec and its surroundings. These villages compose the region of Canada, which means where the houses are. Word that Jacques Cartier will use to name the whole of these new lands, and you may have guessed that this is the word that will become the name of the country, the Canada.
Qu'est-ce qu'il dit, mon père? Le commandant Cartier dit que sa nation s'appelle le Canada. Canada? Ah bon? Canada.
Mille pardons, sire. Je pense que ce mot veut désigner ce groupe de maisons là-bas.
Mais non, mon jeune ami, ayez confiance en moi, c'est sa nation. Le Canada, c'est très clair.
This valley is inhabited by half-sedentary Iroquoians, who are the main actors of the first exchange with the French. On both sides, they are surrounded by the Algonquin. They see as their enemy. I will not give you many details about the First Nation in this historical video, but possibly later in other videos. In any case, the Algonquin are a linguistic family, including several nations, different between them, but also different from the Iroquois linguistic family. However, it is more complicated for the Iroquois of the Great River. Their origin, their affiliation is still uncertain, and unfortunately, they are not on Earth to give us the answer anymore. Moreover, Cartier and his men do not seem to bother about knowing such things. The navigator contented himself to note some generalities and commonplaces about these people, without even care about retaining their names. If some people who watch this video know more about this subject, it is notably important to distinguish the Iroquois of the Great River from the Mohawk Iroquois, which will come inhabit the same lands but far more later. Jacques Cartier and his vessels arrive at the edge of what is today the Canada in July 1534. They go through the Strait of Belle-Isle, go along Newfoundland, connect the Prince Edward Island, follow the coast of today's New Brunswick, explore in detail the Chaleur Bay, until the mouth of the Matapédia River. Then go up following the current Gaspésie up to Port Daniel. There, their first encounter with the Micmac occurs. From that moment, Cartier will write.
Ils vinrent jusqu'à notre embarcation en dansant, en signifiant vouloir notre amitié, en nous disant en leur langage Naputu Daman Assortat et d'autres paroles que nous ne comprenions pas.
Upset, Cartier leaves Port Daniel in a hurry, scared by the bustle of this crowd. We will see it several times, but Cartier really appears as someone who is fearful. He is scared about the unknown for an explorer. He doesn't really care about the people he will meet. He acts inappropriately. Of course, the script that worked the best presents a more flattering portrait of him and an image of savages for the indigenous. The king's court, the people that were going to read those texts, wanted some sensational. It is easier to find authors that have brushed in the direction of hair growth, the important persons, always placing the Europeans as the most civilized, cultivated gentlemen, and so on, and degrading the indigenous. The authors also wanted to match the images already brought by the Spanish about South America people. It is less easy to find authors who write the truth. The versions also diverge because already at the origin, the narratives aren't truthful. Let's come back in 1534. After this brief meeting with the Micmac, Jacques Cartier go on until Gaspé, where him and his crew are going to shelter in the bay from the storm. This is where they meet a group of Iroquois from Stadacone. They have moved up a long part of the river, so from the region of Quebec City to the end of the Gaspésie to establish their winter storage of fish. At this moment took place the episode of the cross, the lie of the cross, that we can see represented by many works of art. Indeed, after having introduced themselves, the group of Sadakone and the sailors proceed with several object exchanges. Then, Jacques Cartier plants a cross in the ground and declares
Ces terres qui se trouvent devant vous sont maintenant les terres de François Ier, roi de France.
The indigenous understand the meaning of Jacques Cartier's act, and a man among them speaks up. This man is Donnacona. With his arms, he shows the extent of the surrounding lands, clearly implying that this country is not to take on the behalf of anyone. The Indians are insulted. The French captain defends himself clumsily.
Mais ce n'est pas ce que vous croyez? Cette croix n'est rien d'autre qu'une balise de reconnaissance pour nos bateaux.
Despite this lack of respect, the Iroquoian curiosity will be stronger. This will be a wobbly approach on both sides. Like one step front and two steps back, they come closer but are strongly pushed on board the ship by the sailor, who gives them food anyway and then make exchanges again. And to end this moment, this first real encounter, this turning point in the life of Indigenous Nations of North America, I am going to read a long passages, but that depicts really well the character of Cartier and say it all about what's coming next. Uncomfortable, Jacques Cartier abruptly decides to run away all this fuss and to take back the sea toward France. However, before to raise the anchor and hoist the sails, he instigates a sad trickery. On his boat are Donnacona and two young people, Domagaya and Tanyoani. Jacques Cartier declares to Donnacona that he holds the two young men to bring them to France, swearing that he will bring them back safe and sound next year. He forces the two young people to give up their pale clothes, their rags, Cartier said, to wear French pants, a shirt and a seaman red cap. Donnacona, outraged, vehemently protests, but Cartier stays deaf to his recrimination, or pretends not to understand. He commands the other Indians to go back to the shore. Astonished, those watch the sails getting unfurled along the masts and the ship going slowly out of the bay. Cartier is leaving without further ado. 1 year goes by. The encounter in Gaspé spread in Canada's villages, so the 7 villages around the current Quebec city. The indigenous are very curious, and all the villages and people around want to know more. The inhabitants of this Canada's region are very excited about the idea of the French return. They want to see more about their revolutionary object. And the tribes want to know more about the possibilities of exchanges and alliances. The Iroquoian of Canada would like to be the entry and management gate of the goods brought by the Europeans. They don't want Cartier to go further on the river and reach other people, including enemies. If the two young men are returned alive, Donnacona will be in charge to be the diplomat who will arrange an alliance. Donnacona was never a chief, as Cartier was thinking. He has been till now a spokesperson, appointed by the mothers of the tribes of Canada. The nations have their own political structure, different from the European model. Nevertheless, the Canada's Iroquoians are impatiently waiting for Jacques Cartier. The latter is lagging behind, since he only come back half September, guided by the two young Stadaconians having survived. The explorer immediately casts a chill over the relation. The inhabitants had organized a party in his honor, but he refused the advances of the population and of Donnacona. He wants to keep traveling upriver to find a way to the West Sea. Then Donnacona refused to help him and to give him the interpreter's favor of these two sons from the first kidnapping, who, by the way, are his nephews. But one more thing that Cartier didn't understand. So, he leaves 2 of his bigger ships, some material, and about 50 men in Canada to keep an eye on, and continue his path toward Hochelaga. That, I remind you, is the place of the future Montreal. He will be back, only 1 month later, in mid-October. This is a disappointed explorer coming back. From his point of view, the Hochelagians aren't more interesting than the Canadians. This is with his disappointment that Jacques Cartier prepared himself to spend the winter. And what a winter! The Stadaconians are suffering. They are facing an unknown disease. Never in their history have they fallen so numerous to an evil so strange. On their side, the French are even worse, suffering of scurvy, a disease of which they don't know the reason nor the cure. The scurvy is a disease due to the lack of C vitamin. This vitamin plays a part in the formation of collagen. As worse symptoms, we can have skin healing difficulties or even the swelling and bleeding of the gums. Despite the tense situation, the Stadaconians propose a cure that Cartier first refuses, thinking about poisoning. After having lost 25 men on 100, he agrees, and the rest of the crew is saved. However, nobody give or find a cure against the epidemic that make ravages among the Canadians. And with all of this, it appeared nowhere that Cartier had shown gratitude toward his saviors. On the contrary, he implies that the Stadaconians were hiding the cure, that one convinced by trickery one of the two nephews to give it to the French. With this quote, we have an example of the conspiracies imagined by Jacques Cartier, of the distortions that have been amplified by some authors, as I explained to you previously. The authors of Ils étaient l'Amérique notably quote Lionel Groulx with his book La découverte du Canada. He builds the legend of a heroic Jacques Cartier, whose righteousness faced the savages' perfidy. These latter are up to no good, whereas Cartier's splendid Breton breaks the imposture of these little demons. Groulx takes the writings of Cartier literally, and then embellish them. He contributes in his own way to the founding myth of the America's colonization. Groulx blames the indigenous to contaminate the French, of giving them the scurvy. That is completely ridiculous because they are used to their environment and their life conditions. And also, a body lack can be given by spitting or touching someone. Yet, this story, with neither head nor tail, will be the official version of Canada's history in the French and Catholic schools during the year 1950. This is why I spend time on Jacques Cartier episodes. This is the beginning. This is from this moment that the French, the European, really step into the world of the Indigenous Nations of North America. And if the first writings are wrong, this is wrong ideas and bad images that we put into next generation's brains. And this still has consequences today. And on top of that, Cartier is fomenting a second kidnapping, melding himself into stories that aren't his business, thinking he would do a favor to another man, Agona, thinking that Agona would like to take the position of Donnacona, whereas men aren't chiefs anyway in Canadian society. In addition, he might finally be interested by Donnacona's stories about Commonwealth in the West. He invites Donnacona, again his two nephews, 3 other adults, 2 little boys and 2 girls offered by the other chief Agona. Once on the deck, Cartier arrests them and takes back the sea to go home in France. We are then in May 1536. These Canadians will all die between 1536 and 1541, far from their lands. All except a little girl who will be adopted by a family, of which we quickly lost the track as nobody really followed it. On the other side of the Atlantic, the disease of the winter 1536 continued to spread. Among the Iroquois of the valley, which will be the major reason of their loss, but also among other nations. What we need to have in mind to understand why the indigenous nations are falling so hardly sick is that the European population is much older. We already have domesticated animals, we do farming, we already have put down a lot of forests. There already are a lot of people gathered in common places, in big cities, that are in contact with a lot of bacteria and viruses. Our population has already been through epidemics, and our immune system has evolved in another way that you can imagine and understand is far from being the case for the nations of America. There will be a third journey. The king, François I, wants to send Cartier back to set up a colony this time. However, the direction of this expedition will be given to Jean-François de la Roque de Roberval, a man of the court having made a career in the army. Cartier is only the second of this expedition, and the texts are differing. Either he would have had the authorization from Roberval, either he would have left without waiting him from impatience. Roberval still making arrangements for the trip. Cartier arrived in Stadaconé in August 1531. The relation being bad, Cartier builds the Charlesbourg Royal Fort, a little further at the place of today's Cap Rouge neighborhood in Quebec City. The sailors and the settlers spend a horrific winter. In June 1542, he leaves the Saint Laurent with the survivors. He comes across his captain Roberval in Newfoundland. Roberval, his crew, with other settlers, only left France in April. Cartier, once more, buzz off without Roberval. The latter asks him to turn back, but Cartier definitively go home in France. Then, Roberval reaches the Charlesbourg Royal, spends a new miserable winter, and go back to France with the survivors in 1533, putting an end to the first attempt of colonization in North America. Here we are done with the biggest troublemaker of the history. He doesn't seem to respect anything. He neglects a lot of information. He only follows himself. However, it was important to spend time on this character because he's the first to really get into contact with Indigenous Nations of North America, with First Nations, and above all, the first to write about them. In the end, we have to remember that Cartier is first a sailor that traveled for commercial purposes. So he studies the geography, then the inhabitants, but for the exploitation of local resources. In the next video, we will see, among other things, the establishment, or rather the control of the fur trade by the crown, the role of Champlain, whose name must ring bells to you, and the true story of Pocahontas. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you like it. I also thank Camille, who supervised this record and who will take care about the editing. See you soon, bye!